everybody. This is Adam Gussow coming to you from, a secluded spot in Oxford, Mississippi. I want to tell you a little bit about my new book, My Family and I, a Mississippi Memoir. It's the story of how I met and wooed and married my wife of 20 years, Sherry, and about how we raised our son in contemporary small town, college town, SEC town, Mississippi. But it has an extended flashback, and in other videos I haven't talked about that. That flashback, the second quarter of the book, is kind of the blues content. Well, as many of you know, I was a street musician in Harlem for a period of time, and it flashes back to before that, which is about my debut at a club in Harlem. I'm taking you back now to probably the fall of '85 or the late winter of 1986. This is before I met Mr. Satan. La Famille was a club on Fifth Avenue in Harlem. And for me back then, that was a scary place. White guys did not really walk around in Harlem, did not go into jazz clubs with a harmonica in hand and say, can I sit in with the band? But that's what I did, and I want to tell you the story. In the book, I tell the story about doing that. I tell about Tippy Larkin, who was on the gig, and a number of other musicians. It turned out the drummer was a guy who'd won amateur hour at the Apollo years ago. What's it like to be, I would have been 27-year-old blues harmonica player in Harlem, been told that there's a jam session at La Famille, that people would like me. I go in, the guy who told me about this, he's not there. He said he would be there. So I'm on my own. What happens on that night? Well, as it turned out, I had a great experience. It led to kind of odyssey through Harlem that night. And it was the first of many times that I ended up going to jazz clubs in Harlem. This is all the prelude to me getting together with Mr. Satan on the streets of Harlem. And I tell that story too. The prelude to my experience at La Famille was jazz at Grant's Tomb, which was a wonderful occasion. Back when I first moved to New York back in like the early 80s, I remember hearing the sound of jazz coming out of the window that my then girlfriend and we were subletting an apartment on the 19th floor. Manhattan School of Music was across the way. The subway tracks were down there, and then like Riverside Church, and there was a park. Grant's Tomb was a park. It turned out that Jazzmobile, which was one of these things that brings live jazz to a series of venues around Harlem, turned out that was the one where Harlem came to Morningside Heights. And so I tell the story about walking through the crowd, sensing my whiteness. I was still kind of innocent and inexperienced, but seeing Dizzy Gillespie that first night, and it was like, wow, man, this is a world where everybody seems to know everybody. It's like a family encounter. And that term is a term that had a black cultural weight, the family. Hey, family. I would say that's one of the distant things that my title, My Family and I, is reckoning with. Well, Sterling Magee and I, Mr. Satan, became partners. It was a rough time in New York. If you know the 1986, December of 1986, when I'd been a street musician in Harlem for like 2 months, 3 black guys were chased out of a pizzeria in Howard Beach, where John Gotti was from, the mob boss, and Michael Griffith. They were chased out with baseball bats. It was horrible in New York in those years. And my book talks about what it was like to be playing on the street after that happened. The fact is, the people of Harlem did not hold that against me, which is an amazing thing to know. But that was the prelude, Sterling's experience and my experience, and of course, Yusef Hawkins in Bensonhurst, a 16-year-old black kid who was going to buy a used car. They were and ended up getting shot in the heart by some Italian tough, like a hood. And it was a horrible thing. And Sterling and I were on the street in Harlem during that period, holding down the fort is the way we thought about it. We were pepper and salt, people would say. You and he are like you're pepper and salt. I had not heard that phrase, but it's a pretty familiar phrase. And again, in black cultural context, I was new to all this. So my book is telling you the story of a youngish 20-something, late 20-something blues musician in Harlem, kind of learning the culture, learning how to dialogue in a way that helps heal the wounds that the stupid people were putting into the world. And then, of course, Mr. Satan and I became a team. We worked for 4 years. We hit the big time. But at a certain point, just before we hit the big time with Margot Lewis and Talents Consultant International and went on tour with Bo Diddley, we took our first out-of-town trip to the International Busker Fest in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which was a heck of an honor for a couple of ragged street musicians from Harlem, but we were ready. We were like, we thought we were one of the best in the world, the duo that we were, because of course you had that Harlem audience going back and forth. The Apollo Theater is just down the block, and we go to the International Busker Fest, and I tell the story of coming back from that, back on the Scotia Prince ocean liner, sort of a sea liner, back into Portland, Maine, and we got racially profiled. And my partner's wife, Miss Macy, who was not a little bit, she was kind of paranoid, and I talk about that. What's it like traveling on the road? An older black couple and the white kid, and you got a paranoid lady in the back seat. But this was a moment where she said, basically, she used the N-word a lot. They're looking at us like we're N's because we got profiled, and I'm seasick, and I'm sitting on the curb, and they are breaking our vehicle down. We had my Honda, and they're breaking it down because they're sure they see a black couple with dreads and a white kid who looks like he's on a bad trip, and we're called Satan and Adam, and they are sure, and we're from Harlem, and they're just seeing drugs. We don't do drugs. We just drank a lot of beer up in Canada, in Halifax. And I'm watching this thing, and Miss Macy is freaking out. And anyway, I tell that story. It's the only time in my life I've been racially profiled, but by God, we did. We kind of pegged the thing. Anyway, that's some of the blues content in my book. You know, playing the blues, learning to play the blues is not just a question of learning the mechanical elements of the instrument. If you actually want to play the music, you got to live the life. And that's part of what I'm trying to do in this book. But I'm doing something more important than that, which is I'm saying I began to have a dream of racial healing, racial reconciliation, and it was grounded in my blues partnership with Mr. Satan. That's where it started. So the book, My Family and I, goes on from that. It goes on to talk about my marriage, my kid. I continue to have that dream. Maybe some of you have that dream. In the early 60s, they had that dream. It hasn't gone away. And music is one place that you can live it, find it, honor it. I hope you think about taking a look at my book. Again, it's called My Family and I, a Mississippi Memoir. And Mr. Satan was from Mount Olive, Mississippi. So that element is a Mississippi part too. All right. See you down the road. Bye-bye.